When we talk about Ukraine's fight for its sovereignty, we usually think about recent history, right? But what we're looking at today is so much bigger than that. This is just the latest, most visible chapter in a struggle that's been going on for centuries. It's the story of an idea, the idea of Ukraine, that just refused to be erased. So picture this. It's August 24th, 1991. The Ukrainian parliament is buzzing. And then these words are read out. It's the active declaration of independence. After centuries of being pulled apart and ruled by other empires, Ukraine is once again its own state. A truly historic moment.
But this wasn't just some top-down decision made by politicians. On December 1st, they put it to the people. And the answer was, well, a complete and total landslide. Over 90%, think about that, voted yes. And this was everywhere, from the west to the east, a majority in Crimea. The Ukrainian people had spoken with one voice. They chose independence.
Now, the timing here is absolutely key. This declaration didn't just happen out of the blue. Literally days before, there was a coup attempt in Moscow. Communist hardliners tried to take over and roll back all of Gorbachev's reforms. When that coup fell apart, the central power of the Soviet Union just shattered, and Ukraine saw its moment. This was the window. This was their chance. But here's the thing that makes this story so compelling. This wasn't the first time. Ukrainians had declared independence before, more than once, only to see it snatched away. So what was it about 1991? Why did it finally stick this time? To get that, we need to look back, way back. So our journey starts more than 300 years ago with the very first major attempt to build a self-governing Ukrainian state. It was a state forged in rebellion, and its story set the stage for everything that followed. Let me introduce you to the Cossack Hetmanate. For its time, this was a pretty radical idea, a semi-independent state run by Cossacks, led by a military commander called a hetman. Its founder, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, led this huge uprising against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which controlled the area. For more than 100 years, this hetmanate was the heart of Ukrainian political life. But its history created a pattern, a kind of tragic cycle that you'll see again and again. So check this out. It's founded in 1649. 5 years later, looking for an ally against Poland, it signs an agreement with Moscow. But that alliance slowly turns into control. And by 1667, Russia and Poland are signing a treaty that literally splits the Hetmanate in two, and they don't even invite the Ukrainians to the table. By 1764, it's all over. Catherine the Great dissolves it completely. An assertion of sovereignty, followed by absorption into a neighboring empire. Keep that pattern in mind. So, with the Hetmanate destroyed, the political dream of a state seems dead. But an idea is harder to kill than an army. The idea of Ukraine survived, not with borders, but in its language, its stories, its culture. And for the Russian Empire, that cultural identity was a massive threat. You see, the fight just shifted from the battlefield to the bookshelf. The Tsarist government in St. Petersburg knew this, and they came down hard with policies of Russification. Look at these decrees. First, the Volyev Circular, and then the M's Ukaz, which was even more brutal. It basically outlawed the Ukrainian language in public. No books, no plays, nothing. The goal was crystal clear: erase the idea of a separate Ukrainian people and just call them Little Russians. It was a policy of cultural annihilation. Fast forward to the 20th century. World War I shatters the old empires, including the Russian one. And when empires fall, opportunities arise. Once again, in the chaos, Ukrainians made a grab for their own state. And here we see that same pattern, that cycle, playing out all over again. In 1917, the Ukrainian People's Republic is declared. There's this incredible burst of hope, especially in 1919, when they unify with Ukrainian lands from the West. But the young republic is caught in a brutal vice, squeezed by the Bolsheviks, the Poles, and others. It just couldn't survive. By 1921, the dream is over, and Ukraine is swallowed up by the new Soviet Union. The first decade under Soviet rule was just a massive contradiction. It was a bizarre mix of promise and terror. On the one hand, in the 1920s, you had this policy of Korenizatsiya, where Moscow actually encouraged Ukrainian language and culture. It led to this explosion of art and literature. But it was a trap, a cruel, deadly trap, because what came next was one of the greatest betrayals in modern history. In the early 1930s, Stalin's regime created an artificial famine in Ukraine. It's known as the Holodomor, which means death by hunger. They forced peasants onto collective farms and took their grain, setting impossible quotas. Up to 5 million men, women, and children starved to death. And here's the sickest part. While Ukrainians were dying of hunger, the Soviet Union was exporting their grain to the rest of the world. This trauma is seared into Ukraine's national soul. And the attack wasn't just physical, it was cultural. That same generation of brilliant writers, artists, and scientists that had blossomed in the 1920s, they were systematically targeted during Stalin's Great Purge, rounded up, sent to the Gulag, or shot. It's called the Executed Renaissance because it was a deliberate campaign to behead the Ukrainian nation by destroying its brightest minds. But even after all that terror, the idea of a homeland refused to die. It lived on in people like Vasyl Stus, a brilliant poet who became a leading voice of dissent against Soviet repression. He spent his life in and out of Soviet labor camps for his beliefs and his art, and he died in one in 1985, just 6 years before independence. His words perfectly capture that deep, unbreakable longing. And that brings us right back to where we started, the final years of the Soviet Union. The whole system, this thing that seemed like it would last forever, was starting to rot from the inside out. And this time, the opening for independence was going to be for real. You can think of it like a series of dominoes. First, the Chernobyl disaster in 1986. It wasn't just a nuclear accident, it was a crisis of faith that exposed Moscow's lies and total disregard for Ukrainian lives. Then, Gorbachev's own reforms, glasnost and perestroika, opened the door just enough for people to speak out. That led to the next domino, mass movements like Rukh in Ukraine, which brought millions into the streets. And the final push? That failed coup in Moscow in 1991. It was the last straw. The center could not hold. So you see, when that vote happened in 1991, it wasn't just a reaction to a failed coup. It was the culmination of everything we've just talked about. It was the memory of Cossack freedom, the resistance against Tsarist bans, the ghost of the 1917 Republic, and the deep, deep scars of the Holodomor and the Purges. That vote wasn't just political. It was historical. It was an entire nation saying, we're still here. So in 1991, Ukraine finally broke that centuries-old cycle of winning independence only to lose it. The vote was a powerful declaration that this time was different. This time, it was for good. And the fundamental question Ukraine has faced ever since, a question forged in over 300 years of struggle, is whether that cycle could truly be broken forever.